Hello and welcome to Cycles of Time, your weekly guide to what's happening on Earth as we make our revolutionary journey around the sun. For time immemorial, our human ancestors have created myths and meanings to help us adapt and thrive as seasons change. Join me each week to explore the intersections of these ancient cycles, from the indigenous medicine wheel to the pagan wheel of the year, the Babylonian and Greek zodiac to the I Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes. I'm your host, Alison, and this is the Cycles of Time podcast. Hey y'all, another week, another episode. Happy Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or whenever you're listening to this. Just a little note to start out. I'm going to get better about saying the days of the week rather than like yesterday or tomorrow for people who listen on different days than Monday. I got some feedback from a friend about that, and so I apologize if it's been confusing in any past episodes, and we're going to go on with the actual days of the week, which I love the days of the week because they're named after planets and they all have special meanings. So I'll do a special episode on that at some point in the future. But anyway, welcome to Cycles of Time podcast, where the wheel of the year keeps on turning. It's been a week. I can't believe it's just been a week since last Monday, the day before. It seems like everything changed, but here we are. And, you know, one of the reasons I started to do this podcast was that everywhere in my life, I was discovering systems of the cycles of time, through the Qigong I was practicing, through the astrology I was practicing, through learning more about the human design system and its foundations. And all around me was a reminder last year that we are operating in a cycle, and that cycle is, you know, it's not the same every cycle. Every cycle we up level a little bit, but we still go around the same same sun. All the planets travel in the same orbits and patterns. And so here we are just tapping back into those cycles. And for me, it's been incredibly grounding to have this podcast where I can think about the energies of the week from these different ancient perspectives that are tried and true, in the sense that, you know, capitalism and patriarchy and nation states have come and gone, but the systems of the zodiac and the I Ching and the medicine wheel have persisted throughout all of that. And so for me, it's a very grounding force to continue to do this work and this project. Sometimes when it feels like the world has changed so much and so much is at stake, that doing stuff that feels kind of silly is not worth it, or something that is not, you know, moving the needle in a very tangible, immediate way is not worth it. And I've had to just keep reminding myself of how much value it's brought to me to be able to see the world in a cyclic way, and to embrace a certain theme of a certain time period that has a lot to ponder within it. And so if you're doing something out there in the world that doesn't feel like a direct action towards like fighting the powers that be or whatever, that it doesn't feel serious enough or this enough, just know that, you know, I think we have to keep doing what we've been doing and bringing forward the passions that we have in our worlds. It's like the most important thing we can do is kind of continuous cycles of creativity. In the Human Design Wheel of the Year, last week was the week of creativity, and Gate 1 was the gate we were transiting through for the U.S. election, and I really took that to heart and started to just think about how a continuous practice of creativity, like this podcast, like whatever it is that you do for your creative self-expression, is one of the most sustaining forces against burnout and against fear and against powerlessness. So here I continue along the dusty road. And so I'll start out by just getting into the transits. I probably don't need to tell you this, but we have a powerful and revolutionary week ahead. So this week's highlights, we are moving in the medicine wheel, which is the inner wheel of the cycles of time diagram. And it's the indigenous medicine wheel that has multiple interpretations and multiple variations depending on tribe and region. But in the system that I follow, we are moving from the direction west, which represents fall and adulthood and emotional sensibility, to the direction north, which represents winter and elderhood and spiritual sensibility. And it's obviously not the winter solstice yet. We have another month plus before that. But I see the way that wheel is oriented, I see it as kind of entering the season of the direction, so that the middle of the season is in the middle of that direction, if that makes sense. So if you look at the diagram on the Substack or on my Instagram at astrosomatics.substack.com or Cycles of Time podcast on Instagram, the diagram is pinned to the top, and you can kind of see how it appears as though the transit is moving into that northern direction in the medicine wheel. So it's also the last full week of Scorpio season this week. We have one more gate after this gate, so 2 more gates of Scorpio season, but next week we will be entering Sagittarius season on the 22nd. In human design and the I Ching, from Monday through Friday, we're in gate 43, which is the gate of insight, also known as the rebel. Saturday and Sunday, we move into final gate of Scorpio season, which is gate 14, the gate of power skills. And on Friday, November 15th at 4:28 p.m. Eastern, we have a full moon in Taurus, which is conjunct Uranus. And this full moon is in human design gate 23, the gate of assimilation. And what's interesting about this full moon, the sun opposite the moon on Friday, is that they're going to activate one of the channels in the human design body graph, which doesn't always happen on a full moon, but it is here, and it's activating the Genius to Freak channel. So I am titling this episode, "To All the Rebels, Geniuses, and Freaks, It's Your Time to Shine." And this week's themes are creative rebellion, breakthroughs and epiphanies are possible, and letting your freak flag fly so that you can own your true voice and not be too concerned about what others are saying, kind of zoning in on your inner light and your inner insight. But what the benefit of the full moon being here is that it's bringing forth the ability to communicate that inner frequency, inner insight to others. So our place in the Wheel of the Year, like I mentioned, we are moving from the medicine wheel direction west, which is water, adulthood, emotionality, to north, which is represented by wind, elderhood, and spirituality. The whooshing cycle element, we are in the season of metal. And we're in the pagan season of Samhain. After a couple weeks ago, we celebrated Samhain. And the next pagan holiday will be Yule, which is on the winter solstice near Christmas time. We are in zodiac season of Scorpio until November 21st. I might have just gotten that wrong a second ago, 22nd, but 22nd, 21st. Right in there. The moon phase right now is a full moon in Taurus. And we're in gate 43 from Monday through Friday, the gate of insight. And then we move into gate 14 on Saturday and Sunday. So that is the gate of power skills, or fire in the heavens. Hello from the other side. I think that it's hard to believe, like I said before, that less than a week ago, I recorded the last episode where there were visions of sugar plums and different election results swimming in my head. And although the results were not a shocker to me, this new reality TV show that we find ourselves in, I was more than half sure that it would go this way, but it's still hard, even if you're anticipating the possibility of something happening. It's hard to remember that feeling in your body of like a vacuum or a rug being pulled out from under you, kind of a free-falling feeling, or a feeling that just simply that everything is different now compared to a week ago. Everything has changed, right? On kind of all across the board. And part of me is like amazed that we are not more preemptive, that our human minds and bodies don't react sooner to the potential, but we can't, right? Because that would be holding too much preoccupation, too much worry before something actually happens. But I remember, beginning of spring being like, oh, this is an election year, last January, and being like, we got to stay vigilant, we got to be involved. And then, of course, there's some involvement, but overall, just the happenings of the past year have been so overwhelming in so many ways and so much to respond to that there was no other option than it just suddenly being like, okay, here we are, new reality, let's go. But it's just that, collective consciousness is a trip. How everything changes and this sense of everything changes. The world keeps on turning. Everything kind of stays the same if you're not tuned into that collective consciousness. But even if you're not reading a lot of news and paying a lot of attention, if you're kind of not online, I think it still feels, you can feel it palpably that there is a shift that has happened out in the world by, certain people being empowered, other people feeling disempowered, and just kind of a power exchange, power shift that's happening in the collective. And what I've really noticed most of all is this instant canceling of both the left by the right and the right by the left. And it's been really wild to witness, if I was to zoom out and be an alien, kind of observing the earthlings at this moment. It's just this kind of quick cancellation. And I'll probably get a few remove me from your list replies to this email that I sent out in this podcast. The last essay I wrote the day after the election got a couple of those. And I've heard from other writers that it's been kind of just an instant, like, please unsubscribe, and just can't even hear the other side right now. If something stirs you the wrong way, it's like, oh, wait, you're not on my team. There's this vicious kind of team loyalty that's going on right now. And it feels like we are a trigger-happy nation right now, really ready to point the finger and worse at the bad guy. And we're also having a hard time on a conceptual level really grokking how the bad guy is not the left or the right, but it's actually the system at large, which is the system that we live in that's based on extraction and slavery and extreme inequality and systemic hierarchy. We've all heard of divide and conquer as a tactic. I think we all know about that from the history books. But we aren't quite ready to admit that the powers that be are dividing and conquering the very populace that they're claiming to be standing for. And it all feels kind of like a big joke. I saw a speech that Donald Trump gave today about free speech, freedom of speech, and how the deep state was planning to censor Americans, and he's removing censorship completely and getting a lot of cheers for that. And what I'm seeing out in the world is a massive amount of hate speech. And maybe freedom of speech is one of our founding principles as a nation, but it's being taken to this place of canceling and dissolution and complete and utter ability to let your hatred show through and let your self-orientedness show through. So that's the thing that's really standing out to me the most, is that I don't want to get sucked into, and I'm going to try as much as I can to not get sucked into. Elon Musk's net worth went up $25 billion in one day after the election, after he invested a mere $118 million to Trump's campaign. And the world's 10 richest people gained a whopping $64 billion from this re-election. The Truth Social owner, Trump Media and Technology Group, Trump's social media company, also really cashed in at this election, and the shares of that company, which Trump is a majority shareholder for, skyrocketed 35% in value. So, wow. I think that just speaks for itself. And so in the American dream, everybody just wants to be richer. That is what the American dream is about, is pulling yourself up by your bootstraps so that you can have possessions and buy happiness, the way I see it. And so it's kind of get me rich no matter what it takes to get there. And so when the perceptively richest man, with the gold toilets, the man who has gold buildings everywhere and people see as really wealthy and see as somebody who's made it, when he promises that your groceries are going to get cheaper and immigrants aren't going to take your blue-collar job, you're going to reelect him. I think even if he's a convicted felon, a rapist, a self-admitted molester, a racist, a xenophobic man who is deeply indebted to foreign mafiosos and puts us at a huge national security risk, it's I'm gonna give you some tax cuts, all these promises about removing the deep state and their supposed conspiratorial control. And it's crazy to watch it all play out and to see voices become louder in the wake of all of this. I'm not entirely convinced that the election wasn't, rigged, with the amount of big data and big tech guys on the orange man's team, and with his continued promise during his campaign that there was no need to vote. He kept saying over the course of the summer, I have all the votes I need. And Daniel Pinchbeck, who I follow here on Substack, wrote a good article about why this might be the case, that, election fraud might have been the case, but why it ultimately doesn't matter anyway. I think that the Biden administration doesn't want to be hypocritical, and they wouldn't use the same rhetoric as the so-called bad guys did in 2020, because, with the insurrection and claims of voter fraud last time around, the Democrats wouldn't want to come back around and swing that same bat. So, peaceful transfer, there hasn't been any kind of hubbub about that not happening. And there are enough loudly empowered trumpeters out there to convince anyone that they stand for the vast majority of Americans. And I don't think it even really matters to look into it. I don't know. It's just, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility that the election wasn't fully honest, because these are the times we're living in. There's a Instagram post that I saw that's based on a Turkish proverb that says, the forest was shrinking, but the trees kept voting for the axe. For the axe was clever and convinced the trees that because his handle was made of wood, he was one of them. So people seem to believe that Trump's administration will keep us safer and mock everyone who feels truly unsafe under his promised policies, with the notion that he will fight the true enemy, which is the enemy out there, the others, the immigrants and the Muslims and the sinners and people who are not like the great Americans. And so that's where the bottom line of safety truly lies. I've seen a lot of that rhetoric where it's you're saying you're feeling unsafe as a woman. Well, you don't understand how you're being kept safe by this administration. And so that's something that's been kind of shocking to me a little bit. But we just operate, I think humans right now are living on such different realms of where the ripples out from the rock lie. You can look at foreign policy, and you can look at, international relations, or you can look at your neighborhood, or you can look at your state, or you can look at your personal experience. And to look at all of those layers and ripples of the stone that's thrown in at the exact same time is almost impossible to do. And so it's kind of hard to even have critical analysis or arguments that are going back and forth across lines between personal and geopolitical across the globe. That's one thing that I've really noticed within politics, is that there's no differentiation between the personal and the transpersonal, and it's really hard to hold both of those truths at the exact same time, and also then prioritize which one is more important: my personal lived experience, my job, my anecdotal experience I had with another person, or the data and stats about what's going on across the entire world and how the United States is involved. So, I think despite being anti-big government, a lot of the Trump supporters are clinging to this old idea that the nation state is still here to serve and protect the citizens inside its borders, and that there's a limited amount of support and protection to go around. So we have to decide who's in and who's out. But, from my perspective, that's the old garb, the old world of the nation state, and it's with globalization and multinational corporate infrastructure, it just doesn't work that same way anymore. But it's hard to know that that's shifted. And then, on the other side of the coin, the deep pockets of AIPAC are keeping the Dems from standing up to an expanding genocide across the Middle East. And the neoliberal entrenchment in big money is not going away. So I'd say the truth is that the two-party system here is so completely bought and sold by the richest people in the world that the nation state hardly matters anymore. And what matters most is keeping people afraid and distracted with blame and vitriol for each other, so that the extraction economy can continue along its course, kind of on either side. And I'd love to hear your perspective on this. I really believe in an open discourse, and I'm kind of using this as a soapbox, and I will get into the astrology and the human design stuff in a minute because it's very relevant. But I'd love to hear what you have to say. I'm sure, by speaking at all at this moment in time, there will be an equal and opposite reaction. There will be big supporters that fan your flames. There will be people who are like, you're so wrong. And I'm glad that there is discourse that is at least happening. That is one truth that I believe in. So, what can we do? Can we demand a recount? Can we eat the rich? Can we wear a blue bracelet to virtue signal to other white women that we're one of the good guys? I don't think any of those are the solution. And I personally have no idea how to beat a monster of this magnitude, and I don't think many of us do. But like I said last week, before the proverbial shit hit the fan, I do know that creativity is key. And like I mentioned, last week's transit through the gate of creativity and self-expression, which was that first gate of the I Ching and the Human Design Wheel of the Year, it really helped me get through the world's longest week of the year with a positive outlook for the most part. And I really took the assignment of creativity literally last week, as I have frequently been doing with these 5-day transits through the gates in that outer wheel. And so I created a dozen or so stuffed animals out of felt with my kid and made her a few different costumes with the sewing machine. And I made snowmen and snow angels during this whiteout storm of the century here in Santa Fe, and made the play structure slide into a sledding ramp, and made a lot of banana bread and soup and chai, and I wrote essays and articles to kind of clarify my perspectives, and I called friends and organized in-person meetups. I took walks and created footprints on the ground as a act of creativity as well. I think it's just really important to create right now. And the opposite gate from gate 1 in the Wheel of the Year is gate 2, which is the gate of the receptive. And I believe that many of us are feeling so disempowered by the election that we're feeling like victims and receivers and passively standing by and waiting for the other shoe to drop. But I think that, because we're in a position of receiving so much information, there's so many articles that are like, what is Trump going to do his first day in office? And lots of, forums on social media that are just popping off with so many things to respond to or react to. And there's so many headlines and so many think pieces and just so much that, I think reading and writing and staying informed is very important always. But if we don't balance this receiving with creating, we will drown in information and overwhelm right now. And that's just the fact of the matter. So the sun left gate 1, the gate of creativity, yesterday, Sunday, the 10th. But this week's transit continues on this theme through the gate of insight, gate 43 this week, which is known as the gate of the rebel. And this energy is all about listening to our inner voice, our inner truth, our insights, and being highly selective about the influences of others. The full moon this week, as I mentioned, is happening in the gate across the sky from the gate of insight, which is known as the gate of assimilation. That's gate 23. And so together in the human design body graph, these two gates, 43 to 23, connect the ajna or third eye center to the throat center, and they form the channel of structuring, which is commonly known as the genius to freak channel. And this full moon will be all about bringing insights from your third eye, looking inward, to your throat chakra and speaking them out into the world, whether you know that you're going to be understood or not. This full moon is also conjunct Uranus, so that adds to kind of the let your freak flag fly vibes, because Uranus is known as, the eccentric kind of disruptor lightning bolt of the zodiac. And so we can definitely expect the unexpected this full moon, and a lot of freak and genius communications to be coming through. So, be discriminating, add to it if you feel called, but just know that there's going to be a lot of perhaps new information that comes into the fold. And, last week was about coming out of the shadows and embracing our own creative self-expression. And this week is about taking it a step further and owning your inner rebel and your inner freak. And just knowing that you might be misunderstood by some people when you do embrace that. And I'd say you're probably guaranteed to be called an outcast or a weirdo or a monster by some folks in these polarizing times. Like, no matter what you say. We are just in the kind of times that, like, no matter what you say, you're going to be weird. So you might as well be your weirdest, truest self. And when you own that, when you really own your insight, and by looking inward, you find your truth, the people who see you will really see you for your individuality and your unique spark and your true genius. So this week it is quite the assignment, but I hope you join me in, letting your freak out and finding that genius, seeing where it sticks. So, going to the medicine wheel that I mentioned and the kind of inner wheels of the year that I track, I am thinking a lot about where we're at kind of in a larger context beyond that 5-day transit and full moon 1-day transit through this genius to freak energy. We're also in this part of the year where we're in Scorpio, kind of the culmination of Scorpio. And Scorpio is a fixed water sign. And for everybody who doesn't know, every sign has a modality and an element. So the modalities are fixed, mutable, and cardinal, and the elements are water, earth, fire, and air. And so Scorpio is a fixed water sign. And if we're being literal, fixed water means ice. It is frozen, frost, permafrost, kind of the hardening of the flow. It's a water sign that has this ability to get deep into emotions, but there's a certain hardening of the flowing water and fixing it in place. So yeah, the full moon this week is commonly known as the Beaver Moon in some indigenous areas, but another popular name is the Frost Moon because we're at this frosty time of year, and that's very real here. There is so much snow. I think we got 18 inches, and there's just so much snow on the ground. So I'm like, all right, here we are in frosty fixed water time. And, it's been so frosty and so icy, and the wind is icy. And I'm just feeling all of the elemental analogies of this season very truly. And I know those of you in, Long Beach or England or South America are not. And I am grateful for this. Northern New Mexico, Santa Fe has such a direct tie to this season as I experience them. So it's been truly fascinating to see that. But, in the indigenous medicine wheel, as we approach winter, we're moving from the season of water and the direction of west, which symbolizes maturity and adulthood and the emotional processing that comes with adulthood. Switching into the direction north that has the element wind as a symbol and the life stage of elderhood and the realm of spirituality and spiritual processing. And so for me, that icy wind that I'm experiencing when I go on dog walks as I crunch through the, icy mud puddles on the road, I'm feeling that kind of this bracing when the wind comes and hits my face, but also this wisdom of kind of like how to prepare for that, how to get into a spiritual experience, to not let my emotions of frustration and just feeling freezing to overcome, but to say, okay, no, this is refreshing. This feels great. I'm moving my body through space. And this is something that I know I need to do in times like this. Creating those footprints on the ground as a creative act, creative process. And that's a spiritual act when it's cold outside and when it's not comfortable to be walking through the muck and the ice. In the Taoist 5-element whooshing cycle, we're in the season of metal. And I'm kind of struck that metal, compared with all of the other elements or phases, feels the most like ice in its fixedness. And metal is a time that is also about kind of a spiritual maturity where we are certain of ourselves. Metal is certain of itself, and it's unwielding, and it's strong, and it's fixed, and it's immutable, and it cuts like a sword. It has a certain determination to it. So late fall into winter, we have that energy coming through in the Taoist 5-element cycle as well. So wind and metal and fixed water of Scorpio, all of these things are kind of spiraling around in my mind and feeling really like that's meeting the moment. That's where I have to be. And that helps when I'm thinking about being a rebel, thinking about letting my freak out and my look to my insight for my own inner truth is this, it's an unwaveringness. It's knowing that we've gone through an emotional processing. We've gone through an earthen experience of harvest and having our feet in the soil. And now we're on that permafrost. And so this spiritual discipline, spiritual clarity and precision and certainty is what's rising to the surface on the larger level in these inner wheels of the cycles of time right now. And, we've met the challenge of processing deep feelings of the adult stage of the year. And so we're approaching the elder part of the year with that spiritual clarity that's needed to get us through the long winter ahead. And it is spiritual discipline that quells the noise around us and allows us for great insight. So moving on to the gate of insight, gate 43, that we're transiting through in this culmination of late fall and Scorpio season. It's really interesting because the shadow is noise. The shadow is deafness, and it's about kind of like having too much noise in your head, so you're not actually listening to your insight. And I've talked about Scorpio having 3 totems before, the scorpion, the eagle, and the phoenix. And akin to those 3 totems of Scorpio season, the Gene Keys creator, Richard Rudd, says that all qualities of humanity have 3 stages of evolution. The first is known as the shadow, and it's focused on survival. The second is known as the gift, and it's focused on service. And the third, the siddhi, is all about surrendering to the greater, bigger picture. And this reminds me of the scorpion survival skills, and the eagle is a symbol of service and hope. The American eagle, it's all about, kind of hope and service. And then the phoenix is an effigy of surrendering to the fire so that we can be reborn out of the ashes. And gate 43, so that's like all gates and all energies. There's this belief within the Gene Keys specifically, but a lot of esoteric systems of the Trinity, that there are 3 kind of levels and 3 stages of transmutation. And gate 43 particularly has the 3 stages of evolution that are quite lined up with this story of transmutation, which is really interesting as we're traveling to the end of Scorpio season. We're traveling into the depths of Scorpio season. So the shadow of gate 43 that we're traveling through this week is deafness. The gift is insight, and the siddhi is epiphany. And in human design, it's known as the gate of insight, and I've seen it called the rebel and the listener within. And in the I Ching, 43 is known as breakthrough or determination, which is symbolized by the trigrams lake over heaven, which evokes the water of a lake rising up into and above the heavens, which makes a cloudburst or a breakthrough of rain very likely. So it's, insight, breakthrough, rebel, epiphany. These are the words that we're working with in this current moment as we're skating through the frost of the spiritual discipline, right? At the shadow survival-based frequency, those with 43 active in their chart are often afraid of being outsiders, outcasts, and not being accepted. When they're in this frequency of fear, which the shadow-based frequency is always about fear, there's a certain deafness to the world around them that manifests as a defense mechanism. So people with gate 43 who are kind of in a fear-based mentality can fill their minds with a lot of internal noise. And this noise can take the form of worry, kind of constantly worrying that they're not enough, or they'll never be accepted, or that nothing's ever going to work out. And it can also take the form of noisiness, which is like an inner cacophony that blames others all the time and insists that they already know everything and they don't need any advice or information from the outside because they already know. So those are the shadows of this week. It's like, oh, I already know everything, so I don't need your perspective. Cancel, click, Or it's this worry that like, oh my God, everything possible, like what's going to happen on day 1, what's going on. Those are definite manifestations of gate 43 that could come through. So at the gift frequency, which is again focused on service to the whole, gate 43 utilizes this quality of deafness to their advantage. And they do this, or we can all do this, simply by flipping the script and realizing that our inner landscape is filled with wisdom. And so rather than filling ourselves with noise of worry or blame, we can stop blaming others or worrying that we won't fit in and start to own our own unique creativity and voice, which is what I've been harping on for a couple weeks here. So this is where the archetype of the rebel shows her face as a strong and powerful individual creator, someone who doesn't need permission from the outside world to be her true self, doesn't need a societal stamp of approval. And the insights that come from owning her power and quieting the noise are profound and very capable of inspiring others in a huge way through being their authentic self. And so there's a certain amount of spiritual clarity and spiritual discipline that's needed to quiet the noise, right? Especially when there's so much noise around us. So like I've mentioned, gate 43 comes right after gate 1, the gate of self-expression. And so it's all about transformation of our creativity and that self-awareness of what it means to be an individual and unique and creative person. Creative self-expression is a beautiful thing, but a truly vulnerable thing too. And so gate 43 reflects the fear of rejection that often comes right after we've put ourselves out there into the world. And 43 has a deeply self-reflective quality. And so this week's energy could either show up as feelings of embarrassment or shame, or a deep desire to be accepted, or it could bring profound insights into the beauty and genius of your unique individuality. So, yeah, as we think about these gates that the sun transits through, or these parts of the other wheels of the year, it's, there's people who have these defined in their charts, and I always reference them and have had interviews with people where the sun is transiting through their gates. But these energies are affecting all of us as well. It's one of these things that as the sun transits through, there's a certain amount of energy to this specific thing. And so we can always think about each week how these energies apply to us. And so I'm definitely putting a lot of thought into that this week about kind of like how to not be deaf, but also be deaf, like not fill my brain with so much clutter and noise that I can't hear my own self, but also how to use that discrimination of what we're letting in to allow myself to hear my inner voice. And that's the paradox this week that I welcome you to kind of think about a little bit and feel into. Like, what is that? It's a fine line, that porous membrane of how we can focus inward and listen to ourselves, but also allow for other opinions and voices in to some extent. At the city frequency of 43, this gate, those with this gate active in their charts who surrender to the wisdom can become transmitters for grand epiphanies. And the name Epiphany comes from the great epiphania, which means appearance or manifestation. And it's the quality of profound insights and intuitive knowings that kind of come out of the blue. Epiphany, for those of you who have a background in Christianity, probably know that the word epiphany most commonly refers to the manifestation of Jesus Christ as the Son of God. And Epiphany is a feast day that celebrates the day when the three magi, or the wise men, visited baby Jesus in the manger. The Magi's identity is somewhat mysterious as far as who they were, but the etymology of them suggests that they were Persian priest astrologers who followed a star to find the Son of God. And I found that so fascinating that they were, they followed the star to Bethlehem. And so we see the number 3. We were just talking about the number 3 of this shadow gift and city levels of experience, and also the Scorpio, Eagle, Phoenix levels. And so having the Magi come up in this gate with the 3 wise men, there are these 3 wise astrologers. We can also look to the 3 gifts that they brought along with them, which are frankincense, gold, and myrrh. And as I think about these 3 stages of human evolution, which are survival, service, and surrender, the 3 gifts that the Magi, these holy astrologers, brought it also kind of fits that narrative of survival, service, and surrender. So frankincense was used for worship, and it's symbolic of a religious kind of fear of God, turning to God for survival. And gold is symbolic of the king, who is one who is in service to the community. And then myrrh is a perfume that was used to anoint dead bodies, and it's symbolic of surrendering to death. So that was my little aha moment, a little epiphany of whoa, that's cool within Christianity, within this story. Again, this is me just kind of seeing parallels, and it's not coming from a lot of research or true source, but I did look into these herbs and metals and their symbolism, and I found it just really fascinating, just really meditating on this survival to service to surrender flow chart of life, and how the epiphany is something that I don't know a ton about, but having an epiphany or being open to intuitive knowings coming through, it was just an interesting parallel. So I digress. But I definitely didn't think that in researching this, that the 3 stages of Scorpio's evolution would pair so nicely with the 3 wise men and their gifts, but it just felt like a nice little surprise in there. On a personal note, my daughter's birthday is this week. She's turning 6 years old, and she just lost her 2nd front tooth, so she just looks like a whole new person to turn 6. And 43 is her sun gate. I thought about interviewing her, but she wasn't in the mood. So I have just had a fascinating time looking at this gate through the perspective of the person that's closest to me in the world, who I spend the most time with, and seeing insights from Gate 43 and applying them to her. I didn't draw an astrology chart for her until she was, 4. I was not interested in pigeonholing her or giving her as a baby, any kind of projections of what I thought she would be or should be. But as she's grown up and really shown me her definite personality, she is a very, very defined person in human design. She's like a fully divine chart. So she knows who she is, and she is not afraid to express it. And so seeing her as a rebel, this natural born rebel, someone who can be a little bit deaf sometimes, she definitely has that quality of deafness where probably a lot of toddlers and young kids do, but she, compared to others, kind of hears what she wants to hear. And she has this thing about, I already know, she knows she's right without listening to other perspectives. And yeah, she says it all the time, I already know that. And so although this is insanely frustrating as a parent who wants to guide and teach my child, I'm definitely grateful that she knows how to stand up for her ideas and insights. And as she gets older, she's getting better and better at communicating them as well, which she does have the Gate 23, which is the connecting gate to form this channel of the Genius to Freak channel, the structuring channel, which is all about communicating these insights. So I'm grateful that that is the case. And she is getting, more and more inclined to use her words and to communicate. And that's been really helpful in that kind of deliberate deafness of filling her mind with a lot of what she already knows. Coincidentally, my daughter's name means bright star in Tagalog, referring back to the goddess of the morning and the evening star, or Venus, in the ancient Philippines, where her father's side of family is originally from. And so since she was little, she has often talked to me about remembering when she was a star. And this has now become our kind of shared mythology. She says before she was in my belly, she was a star. And most of what she knows intuitively and already knows can be explained by the fact that she experienced it when she was a star. And she also has a special place that she goes to now at night where she says everything is upside down and backwards. And it's she's already experienced most of what I have to teach her in that, the other world, which is fascinating and scorpionic. It's called Super Spiderland. I might have mentioned it before, but it's lingered, and it's really just fascinating to see this rebel with a cause kind of show up, where she's starting to write a lot and make a lot of books, and she does a lot of it backwards. She is left-handed. She's very smart and very bright and knows her letters and numbers, but a lot of times it's like a mirror image. Sometimes she writes things completely backwards, which would be difficult in like the public school system at this point. It started being a little difficult. But the way I've learned to kind of let her do her own thing, and then she'll sometimes do it my way too, once she gets comfortable enough to know that she's accepted in her way and that she did that on purpose. Then she'll say, oh yeah, now I'm willing to listen to you now that you've heard my insights. So really fascinating to see this show up. And when it comes to the star mythology that we have and that kind of coincidence, I think that, the Star of Bethlehem that led the three magi to Jesus in the manger, this origin of Epiphany, the city of Gate 43, is thought by some to have been a rare conjunction between Venus, Jupiter, and the bright star Regulus. So just kind of interesting synchronicities. I don't even know what I'm saying here, but there's a certain amount of, okay, maybe you do remember when you were a star. Maybe there's something to this, and I'm just going to let you have that. So, I have prominent in my chart are the gates of confusion and the gates of doubt. So I have spent a lot of time kind of doubting a lot of things and being a critic and a cynic. You might not believe that because I'm now like the queen of woo and bringing all together the systems of the esoteric. But I've definitely spent a lot of time in my life being very kind of cynical and skeptical about things. But I've really stopped doubting her when she tells me that she remembers being a star, or that she already knows things, or that she knows that, doing it backwards and upside down is the way it should be, because that is, is that a rebel or what? So I will keep working with her on listening and on worrying less about being accepted, but I'll never try to undermine her insight and her intuitive knowing. So that's my pact as a parent. Yeah, little rebel. It's amazing. So moving on to the full moon in Taurus, which is across the sky in the gate of assimilation, that is known as the frost moon or the beaver moon, and it is in a tight conjunction to Uranus, happening on November 15th, Friday. And so this moon will reach its peak illumination at 4:28 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it'll be crossing the sky beside the Pleiades star cluster, or the Seven Sisters, in the Taurus constellation. And so being conjunct with Uranus, like I mentioned, it indicates surprises and sudden flashes of insight and eccentric changes that might happen. So the sun in gate 43 is big rebel energy, like I just detailed. And when it's opposed by the moon in its polar opposite gate 23, it'll bring an energy to realize what our internal epiphanies are and how they can be assimilated into the greater picture of society. So without the full moon's assimilating qualities in the earthy, grounded sign of Taurus, the sun's transit through gate 43 could leave us with a whole bunch of misunderstood rebels and freaks who are just out there to get each other and just scream into the void. But I feel like this full moon, it feels like a little bit, I get a tingle when I think of this full moon, because I'm like, what can we possibly handle any more surprises? But yeah, we have to. Right? We have to be ready for it, that icy chill on our face, the gust of wind. So I think this full moon comes at an opportune time and brings the ability for individuals to communicate their insights and ultimately bring awareness and understanding to these insights and epiphanies, which leads to, hopefully, the acceptance of diversity and a diversity of insights. So I really just hope this is true. I'm not a predictive astrologer per se. I would never say like the astrologers who predicted the election were wrong or right. I think that there was a lot of hubbub about that, being like so many astrologers wanted something else to be right or predicted it wrong. And I ultimately just think that there's a lot of different factors that and subjectivity that can lead to looking at multiple charts and day charts and that kind of thing. So I don't have any hold anything bad, but ultimately I tend to look at the moment as far as like what can we learn from this current moment rather than trying to use this as a tool of prediction. But in this case, looking forward a week from now into a full moon, there's a certain hope that I have about the geniuses and freaks and rebels being able to speak their diverse truths, communicate them effectively, and have them assimilated and woven into a larger, diverse tapestry that is not so black and white. So, crossing fingers, let's go. I think that this full moon is a really good time to release some of your brilliant ideas to the larger world. If you have something that's waiting in the wings and you're waiting for an opportune time, this full moon is screaming, trust your inner voice. And it's time to express what's inside you, even if just for one day. And that doesn't have to be a huge launch or a manifesto, but any small act of expression will do. And you'll know when the right time is to share your unique and innovative insights and perspectives. It's a full moon in Taurus, so you can seize it by the horns, seize that bull by the horns, and let it out there. Just trust your insights. One thing I will say about this full moon is that this genius to freak channel that's being highlighted and seen on this full moon is a projected channel, which, if you're familiar with human design, you might know what that means. And if not, don't worry about it. But it's basically about how the best way to be recognized for your genius and your insight is by not like spraying it out to people, but waiting for the right moment, waiting for the right people to be around you or inviting you in some way or another to share your insights. Putting yourself in the right place at the right time, but not just deciding like I have to say what it is that I'm thinking and then becoming deaf to any rejection of that, because it's about learning to accept rejection as part of the whole human experience. Not everybody is going to accept us, as we know, and I think by integrating that into our bodies and saying, okay, yeah, as people out there are not going to like me, and that's okay. Rather than saying, oh, I'm going to say what I mean, and if people don't like it, then too bad. That's the risk here. So it's really about just like that humility and that spiritual discipline to say, okay, I'm going to stay true to my insight, to my word. I'm going to create quiet space so I can really know what that insight is with clarity without, calming the noise down. And then I'm going to be brave and speak it out, and also know that whatever comes back doesn't have to make me feel insecure. So it's an internal self-awareness that comes from just digging to the depths of ourselves. So as a channel of structuring, this genius to freak channel is kind of about making things more efficient and kind of enhancing our acceptance of those who are different and the role they play in the transformation of our old order into new forms and values. So not only thinking about yourself this week and kind of how you're self-expressing and what insights that you're having, but really taking it as a sign to say, like, if I want to self-express and feel accepted in my body, I have to also listen to others. And so it's really a gate of recognizing genius in yourself and in others through being unabashedly yourself. I just found an icicle out, a giant icicle hanging off of one of my canales outside of my house, and plucked it down. It was like 3 feet long, maybe not quite, 2.5, but I put it on my head and became a unicorn for a moment. So it's one of those like always be yourself unless you can be a unicorn weeks. Anyway, as we continue on through this beautiful week of insight and self-expression and being your rebel, we are going to move into the gate of power skills over the weekend, which is the final gate of Scorpio season. And that's going to be transiting from Saturday through next Thursday when we're going to enter Sagittarius season. And power skills is kind of what it sounds like, and we'll get into it more next week. But it's really about taking this creative insights, and the creative insights, of course, sprung out of the deep facing our fear-based energies that we were having during spooky season and Samhain and Dia de los Muertos, and getting to that the depths of where our selfhood comes from, which is our ancestry, which is our combined experience with others in this world, and taking all of that and saying, okay, now what do I want to create out of that? And then now what do I want to own about that creativity? What do I want to own about my own unique self-expression, my own uniqueness as a human? And then the next gate after that is power skills. It's like, okay, you know who you are, you know what you want to create, you know what you have the ability to create. So feel empowered by that and by your skills that have been cultivated in this process. So again, we'll get more into the gate of power skills next week. I have a dear friend who has this gate as her sun gate, and I'm just thinking of her in my mind's eye as just such a skillful powerhouse of a person who is, just able to climb to the greatest heights by being so self-confident. And so I hope we can all lean into our inner world, our insights this week. I invite you to tune out the noise for a little bit, tune out the worry. If you can, tune out the blame. If you can, for just a little bit, maybe making a single space in your house or a single that doesn't have phones, that doesn't have screens, that doesn't have distractions, or a single time of the day where an alarm goes off and it's like, okay, for the next half hour, I'm going to be in my own insights, looking inward into myself, processing, integrating all of the information that you've been receiving, and letting your freak flag fly, letting the biggest epiphanies that want to come through you come through. And, sharing those epiphanies with those who are close to you, those who you trust, so that you can continue to fan your own flame and fan other people's flames. So have a beautiful week, y'all. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for listening to my weekly rambles, and hopefully they bring you some value. And if they do, they being the rambles. If you get any value from this podcast, I would love it if you would share with a friend who might also resonate with the, living the wheel of the year and the cycles of time. And you can subscribe on Substack for free. It's always nice to get this in your inbox. There's also usually some resources added there, some photos and videos and other images in the Substack post each week. So that's at astrosomatics.substack.com. And you can follow me on Instagram at Cycles of Time Podcast or astro.somatics. And I'm also on TikTok sometimes, occasionally at astrosomatics. And just a little recap of the week, so you have it here. We're in the medicine wheel direction north, just entering the north, representing elderhood and spiritual sensibility and the element wind. And we're in the last full week of Scorpio season before entering Sagittarius next Thursday. We are transiting from Monday through Friday through gate 43, the gate of insight, aka the rebel, and then moving into the gate of power skills on Saturday and Sunday. And then Friday, November 15th, we have that full moon in Taurus, conjunct Uranus in human design gate 23, the gate of assimilation. And that is the day that's highlighting the Genius to Freak channel in the body graph. So that is your forecast for the week. Have a beautiful one, and I'll see you next Monday. Bye, y'all.